Lucy Bennett pressed her stylus against the datapad, sketching the cellular structure Professor Quilmera had just displayed on the holographic board. The classroom hummed with the quiet concentration of 30 students, most of them whispering in languages that sounded like wind chimes or bubbling water. Lucy had gotten used to being the only human in advanced xenobiology class. At 9 years old, she was smaller than most of her classmates, even the ones from low-gravity worlds. The door chimed softly. Professor Quilmera glanced up from her lecture, her forearms gesturing gracefully as she continued explaining herbivore digestive systems. She probably expected a late student or maybe a maintenance drone. What walked through that door made her voice die mid-sentence. Bones stood in the doorway, his scaled head nearly brushing the top of the frame. 8 feet of pure muscle and predatory design, covered in dark green scales that looked like armor plating. His eyes glowed faintly orange, the kind of heat-sensing vision that let his species hunt in complete darkness. 2 rows of teeth showed when he breathed, each one sharp enough to punch through metal. The claws on his hands flexed slightly as he surveyed the room. The classroom became a tableau of frozen terror. A small Pelthian student activated his personal shield with a high-pitched squeak. 2 Valonian girls pressed themselves against the far wall, their leaf-like skin turning pale white. Even Professor Quilmera's normally gentle expression showed something Lucy had never seen before: raw, primal fear. Lucy looked up from her notes, mildly curious about what had caused such a reaction. She saw the massive creature in the doorway and understood immediately. Ratka. She had read about them in her xenobiology texts. Apex predators from Infernus, a volcanic moon where everything either hunted or got hunted. Their entire evolution centered around being the thing at the top of the food chain. Class, Professor Quilmera's voice trembled slightly. We have a new student joining us. This is Bones, transferring from the Combat Training Wing. A low murmur rippled through the students. Combat Training Wing. That's where the scary species went, the ones who came from worlds where violence was as natural as breathing. Lucy noticed several students already tapping their datapads, probably messaging their parents about this development. Bones stepped into the room, each footfall deliberate and measured. His tail, thick and muscular, swayed behind him for balance. Lucy could see how his people had evolved. Every part of him was designed for hunting. The powerful legs for sprinting down prey. The reinforced scales for protection during fights. The heat vision for tracking warm-blooded creatures in the dark. There has been an administrative error in placement, Professor Quilmera continued, her 4 hands wringing together nervously. Bones will be with us until next semester when the schedules can be properly adjusted. An entire semester. Lucy watched as 3 students in the back row immediately started packing their bags. She heard whispers about transfer requests and complaints to the dean. The Valonian girls were crying softly, their fear pheromones making the air smell like cut grass and rain. Bones scanned the classroom with those glowing eyes, his head turning slowly to assess each student. Lucy noticed he didn't move like a person. He moved like a hunter, always aware of his surroundings, always calculating. When his gaze swept past her, she felt a slight tingle, the sensation of being evaluated as either threat or prey. The only empty seat in the classroom was right next to Lucy's desk. The previous occupant, a friendly Altarian named Kevlin, had requested a transfer to another section last week for reasons related to his family's political schedule. Now that empty chair seemed to glow with significance. Bones walked down the aisle between desks. Students pulled their bags closer, leaned away, made themselves as small as possible. The Pelthian student with the personal shield cranked it up to maximum power, the energy field buzzing loudly. One student actually fainted, slumping over their desk with a soft thud. Lucy moved her bag from the empty chair to the floor beneath her desk. She didn't make a big deal of it, just cleared the space and went back to her cellular structure sketch. Her hand remained steady on the stylus. Bones stopped beside the desk. He stood there for a long moment, staring down at the small human child who hadn't run, hadn't activated shield, hadn't even looked particularly concerned. Lucy finished shading the mitochondria on her sketch before glancing up at him. "You can sit down if you want," she said simply. Professor Quilmera is explaining how healthy and digestive systems process cellulose. It's actually pretty interesting. The silence in the classroom was so complete that Lucy could hear the ventilation system cycling air. Every eye was on her and the massive predator standing beside her desk. Even Professor Quilmera had gone silent, probably trying to decide if she should intervene or just pray nothing terrible happened. Bones lowered himself carefully into the chair, which creaked under his weight. The furniture was designed for species much smaller and lighter than Rathkar. He had to angle his legs awkwardly to fit them onto the desk. His tail draped over the side, the tip twitching slightly. Lucy nodded once in acknowledgement and returned her attention to the holographic display. She copied down the next diagram, her stylus moving across the datapad in smooth, practiced strokes. Professor Quilmera swallowed hard, her throat bobbing visibly. "Let us continue," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reactivated the holographic display with a shaking hand. For the rest of the lesson, no one could focus on herbivore digestive systems. They were all watching the human child and the apex predator sitting side by side, one small and fragile, the other massive and deadly. Lucy took notes like always, occasionally tilting her datapad so Bones could see the diagrams better when he seemed confused about the cellular processes. When class finally ended, students fled like someone had opened an airlock. Professor Quilmera remained at her desk, trembling slightly, watching as Lucy calmly packed her bag. Bones stood slowly, stretching muscles that clearly weren't designed for sitting in classroom chairs. Lucy slung her bag over her shoulder and headed for the door. Behind her, she heard Bones following, his clawed feet clicking against the floor. She didn't run. She didn't look back. She just walked to her next class like it was any other day at Galactic Academy Station Harmony. 3 days had passed since Bones joined the xenobiology class, and the academy was still buzzing with nervous energy. Lucy had counted 17 formal complaints filed by concerned parents, 12 transfer requests from students who refused to share a classroom with a Rathkar, and at least 30 messages on the student forums demanding something be done about the dangerous predator in their midst. Lucy sat in her usual spot, reviewing notes from yesterday's lesson on symbiotic relationships. Bones arrived exactly 2 minutes before class started, just like he had every day. He lowered himself into the chair beside her with the same careful precision, trying not to break the furniture that clearly wasn't built for someone his size. "Morning," Lucy said without looking up from her datapad. Bones made a sound somewhere between a grunt and a rumble. Lucy had learned that meant acknowledgement in Rathkar communication. They didn't waste words when simple sounds worked just as well. Professor Quilmera entered the classroom, her forearms clutching her teaching materials a bit too tightly. She still flinched slightly whenever Bones moved, but she was getting better at maintaining her composure. The lesson today was on planetary classifications and how different worlds shape the evolution of their dominant species. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a rotating galaxy map. Professor Quilmera tapped her control pad, and various planets lit up in different colors. Green for garden worlds, blue for aquatic worlds, yellow for desert worlds, and red for what the galactic community called Deathworlds. As we discussed last week, planetary classification determines much about how species develop. Professor Quilmera explained, her voice steadier now. Garden worlds produce species adapted to abundance and cooperation. Aquatic worlds create species with different pressure tolerances and communication methods. And death worlds create species adapted to extreme survival conditions. A planet appeared on the display, spinning slowly. It showed continents and oceans, white clouds swirling across blue skies. Lucy recognized it immediately. Earth. This is Earth, classified as a Class 12 Death World, Professor Quilmera continued. Several students shifted in their seats, glancing at Lucy with new wariness. Class 12 is among the highest danger ratings we have. The planet features apex predators on every continent, venomous species numbering in the thousands, extreme weather patterns including hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards, and tectonic activity that regularly devastates large areas. The display zoomed in, showing various Earth creatures. A grizzly bear tearing into a salmon. A saltwater crocodile exploding from murky water. A great white shark breaching to catch a seal. A pack of wolves coordinating a hunt across snowy terrain. Earth has more apex predator species than most entire galaxies, Professor Quilmer said quietly. The dominant species, humans, evolved as persistence hunters. They would track prey for days across hostile terrain, running their targets to exhaustion. They developed pack hunting strategies, tool use, and an unusual ability to survive in nearly any climate on their planet. The classroom was silent. Lucy felt eyes on her from every direction. She kept her expression neutral, like she always did when Earth came up in lessons. She had learned early that showing any reaction just made things worse. The display shifted to show Infernus, Bones' homeworld. A volcanic moon wreathed in ash and smoke. Rivers of lava cutting across dark stone landscapes. Infernus is a Class 11 Deathworld, Professor Quilmer continued. The Rathkar evolved in an environment of constant volcanic activity, sulfuric atmosphere in many regions, and competition with other large predator species. They developed heat vision for hunting in ash storms, armored scales for protection against extreme temperatures, and pack coordination for taking down prey larger than themselves. Bones sat very still beside Lucy, his glowing eyes fixed on the image of his homeworld. She noticed his claws flexing slightly against the desk surface, leaving tiny scratch marks in the composite material. The Valonian student raised her hand hesitantly. Professor, why would the Academy admit students from such dangerous worlds? Surely they are too violent for civilized education. Before Professor Quilmer could answer, another student chimed in. My father says Deathworlders should be kept separate from proper society until they learn to control their savage instincts. Lucy felt something tighten in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had heard variations of this argument dozens of times. Bones, however, made a low sound in his throat that reminded Lucy of distant thunder. Professor Quilmer's four hands fluttered nervously. The Galactic Education Charter states that all sapient species have the right to knowledge and learning, regardless of their world of origin. Intelligence transcends evolutionary background. The bell chimed for lunch break. Students scattered quickly, most of them avoiding the area near Lucy and Bones. They gathered their things in silence. As they walked toward the cafeteria, Lucy noticed other students giving them a wide berth in the corridors. Some pressed themselves against walls as Bones passed. Others turned and walked the other direction entirely. The cafeteria was a large, open space with tables designed for various body types and sizes. Lucy found a spot near the observation window, overlooking the station's docking bay. Bones settled across from her, his bulk making the standard-size chair look like furniture for a child. Lucy unpacked her lunch from the insulated container her parents had sent from Earth. Spiced chicken strips, small red peppers, sharp cheese, and some kind of fruit that her mother swore was good for her. The smell made several nearby students wrinkle their noses or move to different tables. Bones pulled out his own meal, chunks of raw meat that still seemed to be steaming slightly. The packaging said it was Infernus cave lizard, flash frozen and shipped across 3-star systems. He ate with efficient precision, his teeth designed to tear and consume, that a group of 3 Valonian students passed by their table. Lucy recognized them from her mathematics class. One of them, a tall boy with silver-tinted leaves for hair, sneered at Lucy's food. How barbaric, he said loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. Eating actual flesh from dead animals. I suppose we cannot expect better from Deathworlders. His friends laughed, the sound like wind through branches. Barely civilized savages playing at being students. Next, they will be eating their meals raw and grunting at each other. Lucy took a bite of her chicken, chewed slowly, and swallowed before responding. Her voice was calm and factual. Humans evolved as omnivores and persistence hunters. We tracked prey across distances that would kill most species from exhaustion. My great-grandfather used to hunt grizzly bears in Alaska using only a rifle and his knowledge of animal behavior. Bears are 3 times the size of an adult human and can break bones with a single swipe of their claws. The Valonians had stopped laughing. They were backing away slowly, their leaves rustling with sudden nervousness. We learned to read tracks in snow, mud, and sand. Lucy continued in the same, even tone. We learned which plants were poisonous and which could save our lives. We learned to make fire, to build shelter, to survive in deserts and tundra and jungles. Every human child knows that Earth is trying to kill them, and we do our best to survive anyway. The Valonians retreated to another table without another word. Lucy returned to her lunch, cutting a piece of cheese with her fork. Beside her, Bones made that rumbling sound again. But this time it sounded almost like laughter. He looked at her with those glowing orange eyes. And for the first time since he had arrived, Lucy saw something other than predatory calculation in his gaze. She saw recognition. "Your people understand the hunt," Bones said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stones. He rarely spoke, so when he did, the words carried weight. "Yeah," Lucy said simply. "I guess vedo." They finished their lunch in comfortable silence. 2 apex predator species from different corners of the galaxy, bonded by the shared understanding that came from growing up in worlds that demanded strength to survive. Recreational period at the Academy took place in the common area, a vast space with various zones designed for different species. There were low-gravity chambers for delicate species, high-oxygen rooms for those who needed it, and open gathering spaces for social interaction. Lucy usually spent this time in the library, but today Bones had asked if she wanted to see the station's observation deck. She had agreed. They never made it to the observation deck. Kevlin Haas stood in the center of the main common area, surrounded by a group of at least 15 students. All of them were Altarians, tall and elegant, with crystalline features that caught the light in impressive ways. Altarians came from a wealthy garden world where everything was carefully cultivated and controlled. They were known throughout the galaxy for their political connections and sense of superiority. Kevlin had been Lucy's neighbor in xenobiology class before requesting his transfer. He had always treated her with barely concealed contempt, the way someone might look at an interesting but ultimately inferior specimen. Now he was looking at Bones with something far worse than contempt. He was looking at him like a problem that needed to be eliminated. "Rathkar," Kevlin called out as Lucy and Bones approached. His voice carried across the common area, and conversations died as students turned to watch. "I believe we need to have a discussion about your presence at this academy." Bones stopped walking. His entire body language changed in an instant, shifting from casual movement to absolute stillness. Lucy had seen nature documentaries about Earth predators doing the same thing right before they struck. Every muscle coiled and ready, every sense focused on the potential threat. "This is an institution of learning and culture," Kevlin continued, gesturing dramatically to the gathered students. Many were recording the confrontation on their devices. "We maintain certain standards here, standards that cannot be met by savage species who barely understand the concept of civilization." A murmur of agreement rippled through Kevlin's supporters. Lucy noticed that several of them had positioned themselves in a semicircle, blocking the most direct exit routes. This was planned. Kevlin had been waiting for the right moment to make his move. "You do not belong among proper students," Kevlin said, taking a step closer to Bones. He had to tilt his head back to look up at the massive Rathkar, but his voice remained confident. "I'm giving you the opportunity to withdraw from the Academy voluntarily. If you refuse, I will make your presence here so uncomfortable that you will have no choice but to leave. Either way, this institution will be rid of you." Bones took a slow breath, and Lucy saw his claws extend slightly from their sheaths. The temperature in the common area seemed to drop several degrees. Students who had been watching with amusement suddenly looked nervous. Even Kevlin's supporters took a small step back. Before the situation could escalate into violence, Lucy stepped forward. She positioned herself directly between Kevlin and Bones, looking absurdly small compared to both of them. She barely came up to Kevlin's chest, and Bones towered over her like a mountain. "On Earth, we have a saying," Lucy said calmly. "The loudest bark often comes from the weakest dog." Kevlin's crystalline features flushed with color, a sign of anger in Altarians. How dare you compare me to some filthy earth animal? I am offering your monster friend a chance to leave with dignity, and you respond with primitive insults. I am pointing out that you are confusing strength with volume, Lucy replied. Her voice remained steady and factual. You stand here with 15 supporters, blocking exits, making threats. That is not strength. That is fear disguised as bravado. The crowd was growing now. Students from various species gathered to watch, some perched on furniture, others hovering near doorways in case they needed to escape quickly. Lucy heard whispers and saw the glow of recording devices. You want Bones to leave because you are afraid, Lucy continued. Not afraid he will hurt someone. Afraid that his presence challenges your assumption that garden world species are superior to everyone else. Afraid that maybe strength comes in different forms and yours is not as impressive as you think. Kevlin's face went through several color changes. You dare suggest that I am afraid of a barely civilized predator? I come from a lineage of scholars and leaders stretching back thousands of years. My family advises the Galactic Council. What does your friend have? Claws and teeth and the instincts of a dumb animal. Lucy felt Bones shift behind her, heard the low growl building in his throat. She held up one hand, a gesture asking him to wait. To her relief, he went still again. You want to prove superiority? Lucy asked Kevlin. Then do it the way intelligent species should. The Science Olympiad team competition is in 2 weeks. Form your team, and Bones and I will form ours. Whoever scores higher wins. The common area went completely silent. The Science Olympiad was the Academy's most prestigious academic event, testing everything from quantum mechanics to xenobiology to advanced mathematics. Teams of 5 students competed across multiple disciplines, and the winners received scholarship opportunities and recognition from universities across the galaxy. You cannot be serious, Kevlin said, but Lucy saw the calculation in his eyes. The teams require 5 members. You have 2, and one of them is a savage from a volcanic wasteland who probably cannot even read advanced equations. Then the terms are simple, Lucy said. You take your 5 best students. We compete as a team of 2. If you're truly superior, it should not matter that we have fewer members. Unless you are afraid that 2 Deathworlders might be more than a match for 5 Altarians. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Kevlin could not refuse without looking weak in front of the entire student body. Everyone was watching, waiting for his response. Lucy had given him exactly what he wanted, a public confrontation, but she had shifted the battlefield from physical violence to intellectual competition. Fine, Kevlin said finally. We accept your challenge. When we win, both of you will publicly apologize for your presence here and submit to disciplinary review for disrupting Academy harmony. And when we win, Lucy said quietly, you will publicly apologize for your prejudice and leave us alone for the rest of the semester. Agreed. Kevlin extended his hand in the traditional gesture of formal challenge acceptance. Lucy shook it, her small hand disappearing in his larger crystalline grip. The crowd erupted into excited chatter. Students were already placing bets, discussing the matchup, analyzing the odds. Most seemed to think Kevlin's team would dominate. A few were not so sure. They had seen Lucy in class, had heard about her perfect scores and innovative thinking. And Bones was an unknown quantity. As the crowd dispersed, Professor Quilmera appeared at the edge of the common area. She looked distressed, her 4 hands gesturing frantically. Lucy, Bones, this is highly irregular. The administration will need to approve this arrangement. It is a formal academic challenge, Lucy said calmly. The student handbook allows for competitive team formations as long as both sides agree. We have witnesses. She gestured to the dozens of students who had recorded the entire confrontation. Professor Quilmera looked like she wanted to argue but could not find the grounds to do so. Finally, she just sighed. Please come to my office. We need to file the proper forms and ensure this competition follows Academy guidelines. As they followed her toward the administrative wing, Bones leaned down slightly. You have a plan? His deep voice rumbled a question. Always, Lucy said simply. We just need to study. 2 weeks vanished like smoke. Lucy and Bones spent every spare moment in the library, buried in textbooks and research materials. They discovered something interesting during those study sessions. Bones was not just strong and intimidating. He had a brilliant mind for physics and spatial calculations, the kind of thinking that came naturally to a species that had evolved to calculate trajectory, force, and momentum while hunting prey across volcanic terrain. Lucy excelled at biology and chemistry, subjects that required careful observation and pattern recognition. Together, they covered more ground than seemed possible for just 2 students. They worked late into the station's night cycle, quizzing each other on formulas and theories until the words blurred together. Now they stood in the academy's main auditorium, and Lucy felt her heart beating faster than normal. The auditorium was packed. At least 300 students filled the seats, with faculty members lining the walls. The Science Olympiad was being broadcast to other stations across the sector. This was no longer just about her and Bones proving themselves. This had become a spectacle. Kevlin's team stood on one side of the competition floor, all 5 of them wearing matching academy uniforms in deep blue. They looked confident, relaxed, like people who had already won and were just going through the formalities. Kevlin himself stood in the center, his crystalline features catching the stage lights and throwing rainbow patterns across the floor. Lucy and Bones stood on the other side, just the 2 of them. Lucy wore her standard academy uniform, simple and practical. Bones wore nothing except a ceremonial sash that Rathkar used to denote students. He had insisted it was important to honor his people during important events. The competition moderator, elderly Pelthian named Professor Drake, stepped to the center of the floor. His 4 arms gestured for silence, and the crowd noise died to a low murmur. Welcome to the annual Science Olympiad team competition, Professor Drake announced. Today we have an unusual matchup. Team Alterian Excellence, consisting of 5 top students, will face Team Deathworld, consisting of 2 students. The competition will test knowledge across 5 disciplines: quantum mechanics, biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Let us begin. The first station lit up, displaying a complex quantum mechanics problem on a holographic screen. Both teams had to calculate the probability wave function of a particle moving through multiple dimensional barriers. Kevlin's team huddled together, pulling out advanced calculation devices and consulting reference materials. Lucy and Bones approached their screen more slowly. Lucy read the problem twice, making sure she understood every variable. Bones stared at the equations, his glowing eyes tracking each symbol. The barrier heights create interference patterns, Bones said quietly, like heat waves rising from lava flows. They bend probability the same way thermal currents bend light. Lucy saw it immediately. She started writing equations, building on Bones's intuition about wave patterns. They submitted their answer 3 minutes before Kevlin's team. When the results displayed, both teams had correct answers, but Lucy and Bones had shown more elegant mathematical proof. The crowd murmured with surprise. A few students who had bet against them looked worried. The biology station came next. A strange organism floated in a containment field, its body covered in iridescent scales and trailing tentacles that pulsed with bioluminescence. The question was simple: identify the planet of origin and explain the evolutionary adaptations that allowed it to survive there. Kevlin's team immediately pulled out genetic scanners and database connections, searching through millions of cataloged species. Lucy walked up to the containment field and just looked at the creature. She studied the way it moved, the pattern of its scales, the rhythm of its pulsing light. The scales overlap like armor, she said to Bones. See how they are thicker on the dorsal surface? That suggests protection from above. Predators diving from higher water levels. Bones leaned closer, his heat vision allowing him to see temperature variations Lucy could not. The tentacles have muscular structures designed for quick strikes. Ambush predator. It waits and attacks fast. Lucy nodded, already writing their answer. She identified it as a species from Tethys 6, a water world with extreme depth variation and pressure zones. The creature had evolved to hunt in the twilight zones where light faded and pressure began to crush. Every adaptation made sense for that specific environmental niche. Kevlin's team was still searching databases when Lucy and Bones submitted. Their answer was not only correct, but included details about hunting behavior that the databases had not cataloged yet. The biology professor monitoring the station looked impressed despite herself. The competition continued through chemistry, where Lucy's knowledge of Earth's diverse chemical compounds gave them an edge. The challenge involved neutralizing a toxic compound, and Lucy recognized the base structure as similar to certain snake venoms from Earth. She knew exactly which compounds would break down the molecular bonds. Physics came next, and this was where Bones truly shined. The challenge required calculating a complex trajectory for a projectile moving through multiple gravitational fields with varying atmospheric densities. It was the kind of problem that would take most students hours of computer simulation to solve. Bones looked at the setup for maybe 30 seconds. His eyes tracked the gravitational sources, measured distances with predator precision, calculated forces with the same instincts that let his ancestors bring down prey from impossible angles. 42 degrees initial launch angle, he said. Velocity of 33 meters per second. Adjust for atmospheric drag coefficient of 0.78. The target will be moving left at 0.5 meters per second when the projectile arrives. So aim 2.3 centimeters right of current position. Lucy fed the numbers into the launch system. The projectile fired, curved through the complex gravitational maze, adjusted for atmospheric resistance, and struck the moving target dead center. Perfect score. The auditorium exploded with noise. Even students who had been rooting against them could not help but react to the impossible precision of that shot. Kevlin's team was still running simulations when time expired on the physics challenge. They got the shot off, but it missed the target by 15 centimeters. Close, but not perfect. The final challenge was mathematics, and it came down to solving a series of connected differential equations under time pressure. Both teams worked frantically, fingers flying across input pads, checking and rechecking calculations. This was pure mental processing speed and accuracy. Lucy and Bones submitted their answers with 10 seconds left on the clock. Kevlin's team submitted 5 seconds later. Both sets of answers appeared on the main display for the judges to review. Professor Drake examined both submissions carefully. The auditorium had gone completely silent. Every student leaned forward, waiting for the final verdict. Both teams have submitted correct answers to the mathematics challenge, Professor Drake announced. However, final scores must account for speed, accuracy, and elegance of solutions across all 5 disciplines. Numbers appeared on the main display. The scoring was close, closer than anyone had expected. But when the final calculations finished, one team's score shone brighter than the other. The winner of this year's Science Olympiad team competition is Team Deathworld, Professor Drake announced. Lucy Bennett and Bones, with a final score of 947 points out of a possible 1,000. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Students were shouting, some in celebration, others in disbelief. Kevlin stood frozen, staring at the scoreboard like it had personally betrayed him. His team members looked equally stunned. They had prepared for weeks with 5 people, had access to the best resources in the academy, and they had been beaten by 2 students from worlds the galaxy considered barely civilized. Lucy felt Bones's massive hand rest gently on her shoulder. She looked up at him and saw something she had never seen before in a Rathcar. He was smiling, showing all those dangerous teeth, but the expression was pure joy rather than threat. "We did it," she said simply. "We did." Bones agreed, his deep voice rumbling with satisfaction. The formal apology ceremony took place 3 days after the competition. Academy rules required it to be public, held in the same auditorium where the Science Olympiad had occurred. Lucy sat in the front row with Bones beside her, watching as Kevlin and his team filed onto the stage. They looked like they had been dragged there against their will, which was probably accurate. Professor Drake stood at the podium, his 4 arms holding the official Academy charter. The terms of the academic challenge were witnessed and recorded. Team Altarian Excellence agreed that upon losing, they would publicly apologize for prejudice and leave the winning team alone for the remainder of the semester. We are here to see those terms fulfilled. Kevlin stepped forward first. His crystalline features had lost some of their usual glow, and his voice lacked the confident ring it normally carried. I apologize for my statements about species from Deathworlds. My words were inappropriate and did not reflect the Academy's values of inclusion and respect. The apology was technically correct, but delivered with all the warmth of a legal document being read by an automated system. Lucy noticed Kevlin's hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes held something darker than embarrassment. They held resentment, the kind that festered and grew stronger over time. His 4 team members followed with similar apologies, each one more wooden than the last. When the ceremony ended, they left the stage quickly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. A small part of Lucy wondered if accepting their apology had been a mistake. Humiliation rarely made people better. It just made them angry. The days that followed brought unexpected changes. More students approached Lucy and Bones between classes, asking questions about Earth and Infernus. A young Pelthian student named Riley asked Bones about hunting techniques on his homeworld, genuinely curious rather than frightened. 2 students from Aquatic Worlds requested study sessions with Lucy for biology, having been impressed by her analysis during the competition. Not everyone was welcoming. Lucy still heard whispers in the corridors, still saw students cross to the other side when Bones approached. But the open hostility had decreased. Winning the Science Olympiad had proven something important. Intelligence did not belong to any single type of world or species. Then the message came. Lucy was in the library with Bones, reviewing materials for an upcoming chemistry exam, when her datapad chimed with a priority notification. The sender was listed as Academy Administration, which usually meant something important or something bad. She opened the message and felt her stomach drop as she read. The Academy was conducting a mandatory safety review of student placements. All students from Class 10 or higher Deathworlds would be evaluated for potential transfer to specialized facilities better equipped to handle their unique needs. The review board would meet in 3 days. Bones read the message over her shoulder. His voice was carefully neutral when he spoke. They're trying to remove me without breaking the agreement. The apology and leaving us alone only applies to students, not administration. Lucy scrolled through the message details. The review board consisted of 5 senior administrators, 3 of whom had strong connections to Altarian political families. The evaluation criteria were vague enough to allow almost any decision. If they ruled that Bones was too dangerous or that his educational needs were not being met, they could transfer him to a combat training facility on a different station. The kind of place where Deathworld species were kept separate from proper society. We need to fight this, Lucy said, her mind already working through possibilities. How? Bones asked. They make the rules. They control the decision. Lucy stood up, gathering her materials with quick, decisive movements. Then we make sure the decision is not theirs alone. Come on. She led Bones through the station corridors to the student affairs office. The secretary, a nervous Pelthian who still flinched when Bones entered the room, tried to tell them the director was busy. Lucy planted herself in front of the desk and refused to move until they were granted an audience. 15 minutes later, they sat across from Director Hammond, a human woman who had run the Academy's student services for 12 years. She listened as Lucy explained the situation, her expression unreadable. You understand the administration has legitimate concerns, Director Hammond said carefully. A Rathkar has never attended general classes before. The safety protocols were designed for less physically dangerous species. Bones has not threatened anyone, Lucy countered. He has attended every class, completed every assignment, and scored in the top 10% of students. The only incidents have been other students reacting to their own prejudices. Director Hammond leaned back in her chair. I'm not the enemy here, Lucy, but I also cannot stop a formal review board. What exactly do you want from me? Help us organize a student response, Lucy said. The review board needs to hear from the students who actually interact with Bones every day, not just from administrators responding to parent complaints. Something shifted in Director Hammond's expression. She pulled up files on her computer, scanning through data. There have been 42 formal complaints about Bones's presence, but there have also been 19 positive testimonials submitted by students and 3 faculty members. That is unusual. Most cases like this are one-sided, because most cases involve actual dangerous behavior, Lucy said. This is different. This is discrimination dressed up as safety concerns. Director Hammond was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I cannot promise anything, but I can make sure those testimonials are included in the review materials. And I can suggest that student representatives be allowed to speak at the hearing. The rest is up to you. They left her office with a small hope, but hope nonetheless. Lucy immediately started organizing. She contacted the students who had submitted positive testimonials, asking if they would be willing to speak publicly. She reached out to Riley and the aquatic students she had been tutoring. She even sent a message to Professor Quilmera, asking for her professional assessment of Bones as a student. The response was better than Lucy had dared hope. Riley agreed to speak, despite being obviously terrified of public attention. The aquatic students offered to submit a joint statement. Professor Quilmera, after much hesitation, agreed to provide a faculty testimony about Bones's academic performance and classroom behavior. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. Lucy was leaving the library late in the evening when a figure stepped out from a side corridor. She tensed automatically, her Earth-evolved instincts warning of potential danger. Then she recognized the crystalline features catching the low light. Kevlin, I am not here to cause trouble, Kevlin said quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. I just want to talk. Bones materialized from the shadows behind Lucy, moving with the silent precision of a natural hunter. Kevlin flinched but held his ground. Make it quick, Lucy said. My family is part of the group pushing for the safety review, Kevlin said. They're using their political connections to ensure the board rules in favor of transfer. They believe removing Bones will restore what they call proper order to the academy. Why are you telling us this? Lucy asked suspiciously. Kevlin looked uncomfortable, his usual arrogance replaced with something that might have been shame. Because I have been thinking about the competition, about how you won, not through violence or intimidation, but through intelligence and teamwork. My family taught me that Garden World species are superior, that we are meant to lead while Deathworlders follow. But you proved that wrong. Both of you. He pulled a data chip from his pocket and offered it to Lucy. This contains communications between my family and the board members. Evidence of coordination before the review even started. If you submit it as part of the hearing process, it might help your case. It will definitely damage my family's reputation. Lucy took the chip carefully. Why would you betray your own family? Because some things are more important than family pride, Kevlin said quietly. Like being able to look at yourself honestly. I was wrong about you and Bones. I'm trying to make that right. He turned and walked away before Lucy could respond, disappearing into the network of corridors that wound through the station. She looked down at the data chip in her hand, then up at Bones. People surprise you sometimes, Bones said, his deep voice thoughtful. Yeah, Lucy agreed. Sometimes they do. The review board hearing took place in a formal conference room deep within the Academy's administrative section. Large windows overlooked the docking bay where ships came and went in a constant dance of arrival and departure. 5 administrators sat behind a long table, their expressions ranging from stern to openly hostile. Lucy recognized 2 of them as having strong, Alterian connections. The room was packed with observers. Students lined the walls, faculty members filled the side seats, and several parents had joined via holographic projection. Lucy's own parents floated in the back corner as translucent blue figures, her father in his old military uniform and her mother in her xenobiology research coat. Bones sat at the respondent table, his massive frame making the furniture look fragile. Lucy sat beside him as his designated advocate, a role the Academy Charter allowed for students facing disciplinary or administrative review. The head administrator, a stern Pelthian named Chancellor Oren, called the hearing to order. His forearms moved in precise gestures as he outlined the purpose of the review. Safety concerns, unprecedented placement, responsibility to the broader student body. The words were carefully chosen to sound reasonable, but Lucy heard the underlying message clearly. They wanted Bones gone. We will begin with testimony from concerned parties, Chancellor Orrin announced. First, we have a statement from the Altarian Educational Oversight Committee. A holographic projection activated, showing an elegantly dressed Altarian official. She spoke for 10 minutes about the importance of maintaining proper educational environments, the dangers of mixing predator species with students from peaceful worlds, and a responsibility to protect vulnerable young minds from trauma. Every word was polite, professional, and designed to paint Bones as a threat. Lucy waded through 3 more similar testimonies, each one building a case that sounded reasonable on the surface, but was fundamentally based on prejudice. She felt Bones shift beside her, his claws scratching softly against the table surface. He was getting frustrated, and she could not blame him. Finally, Chancellor Orrin turned to their side of the table. Does the respondent wish to present testimony in his defense? Lucy stood up, her small frame drawing attention simply because she looked so out of place in the formal setting. We do, Chancellor. We have prepared several witnesses who can speak to Bones's actual behavior and academic performance, rather than theoretical concerns. Chancellor Orrin's expression suggested he was not pleased with this development, but he gestured for her to proceed. Very well. Present your witnesses. Riley was first. The young Pelthian student was visibly shaking as he approached the testimony stand, but his voice was clear when he spoke. I was terrified of Bones when he first arrived. My species evolved as prey animals. Every instinct I have tells me to run from predators. But I watched him in class for weeks. He never threatened anyone. He helped me understand physics concepts I had been struggling with. He is just a student, like the rest of us. 2 aquatic students testified next, talking about study sessions where Bones had patiently explained complex mathematical theories. A student from a desert world mentioned that Bones had helped carry his equipment when it malfunctioned in the corridor, showing kindness when he could have just walked past. Professor Quilmer spoke about Bones's academic record, his perfect attendance, his thoughtful questions during lectures. Her 4 hands trembled slightly, but she looked directly at the board members. In 30 years of teaching, I have seen many students pass through my classroom. Bones is among the most dedicated and intelligent. Judging him by his appearance rather than his actions would be a profound failure of our educational mission. Then Lucy presented the data Chip Kevlin had given her. The evidence of coordination between board members and Altarian political families, the predetermined outcome. The entire review designed not for safety, but for removing an uncomfortable presence from the academy. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Chancellor Orrin tried to maintain order, but the damage was done. The evidence was clear and damning. 3 of the 5 board members were shown to have received instructions from outside parties before the hearing even began. This is highly irregular. Chancellor Orrin protested, but his voice lacked conviction. These communications may have been taken out of context. Then let us add more context, a new voice said from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A massive Rathcar stood in the doorway, even larger than Bones. His scales were darker, marked with scars that suggested a lifetime of survival on Infernus. He wore traditional clan markings and carried himself with absolute authority. Bones stood immediately, his posture shifting to respectful attention. Clan leader Grath. Grath moved into the room with predatory grace. Every student pressed against the walls to give him space. He approached the board table and looked at each administrator in turn, his glowing eyes measuring them. I am Grath, leader of the Infernus Stone clan, he announced. I have traveled 3 weeks to attend this hearing because it concerns one of my clan's young warriors. I was told that this academy valued intelligence and knowledge above all else. I was told that species from all worlds could learn together here. Was I misinformed? Chancellor Orrin shifted uncomfortably. Of course not, clan leader. We simply have concerns about safety and appropriate educational placement. My clan warrior has achieved top academic scores. Grath said, his voice like grinding boulders. He has harmed no one. He has shown intelligence and restraint. On my world, we value strength, but we also value wisdom. Bones demonstrates both. If you reject him, you reject the idea that predators can be more than their instincts. You prove that your talk of inclusion is meaningless. The weight of his words settled over the room like a physical pressure. This was no longer just about one student. This was about whether the Academy actually meant what it claimed about welcoming all species. Chancellor Orrin looked at his fellow board members. Two of them, the ones not implicated in the coordination scandal, looked deeply uncomfortable. After a long moment of silent communication, Chancellor Orrin cleared his throat. In light of the testimony presented and the evidence of inappropriate outside influence on this review process, the board rules in favor of maintaining current student placements. Bones will remain in general classes with no restrictions beyond normal academy rules. This hearing is concluded. The room exploded with noise. Students cheered, faculty members applauded, and Lucy felt Bones's hand settle gently on her shoulder. She looked up at him and saw relief in his glowing eyes. Months passed after the hearing. The Academy settled into a new normal where Bones was simply another student. More species from non-traditional worlds applied for admission. A Rathkar student joining general classes was no longer unthinkable. It was just unusual, and unusual became normal with enough time. Lucy and Bones started a club called the Cross-Species Learning Initiative. It attracted students from all backgrounds, creating a space where differences were explored rather than feared. Riley became the club's vice president. Even Kevlin attended occasionally, though he sat in the back and rarely spoke. That on the last day of the academic year, Lucy and Bones sat on the observation deck, watching stars drift past the station windows. They had just received their final grades. Both had made the honor roll. Bones had been offered a scholarship to continue advanced physics studies. Lucy had been accepted into a prestigious xenobiology research program. "We changed things," Bones said quietly. "Not just for us, for others who come after." "Yeah," Lucy agreed, "though I still think the cafeteria needs better food options for Deathworlders. The spice level is pathetic." Bones made that rumbling sound that was his version of laughter. "Agreed. Next semester, we petitioned for proper seasoning." They sat in comfortable silence, human child and Rathkar warrior, watching the galaxy spin around them. Somewhere on Earth, humans were surviving in their dangerous world, learning to adapt and overcome. Somewhere on Infernus, Rathkar were hunting in volcanic ash storms, proving that strength and intelligence could coexist. And here on Station Harmony, two young people from those brutal worlds had proven that understanding could bridge any divide. The galaxy was a big place, full of species who had evolved in wildly different environments. But intelligence was universal. Compassion was universal. The ability to see past instinct and prejudice, to recognize the person beneath the surface, that was universal too. It just took courage to embrace it. Lucy pulled out her datapad and started making notes for next semester. Ideas for expanding the club, proposals for curriculum changes, suggestions for better accommodating diverse student needs. Beside her, Bones did the same, his clawed fingers moving carefully across the screen. They had work to do. The Academy was better than it had been, but better was not the same as good enough. There would be more challenges, more students who needed advocates, more systems that needed changing. But they had proven something important. Two